TFL EV is brought to you by Flow Charger, maker of reliable, high-quality charging stations for your electric vehicle.
Hey everybody, I'm Max of TFL. Nathan was going to be on this trip too, but he had a last minute emergency, so you can call me Discount Nathan for the day. But I'm here at a very cool opportunity with Polaris looking at the Ranger XP Kinetic, which is their brand new, electric side-by-side basically. And it's in the Ranger series, so a very popular kind of workman's side-by-side, and this is, their bread and butter. So I'm here with Chris. Remind me what you do at Polaris?
Yes, I'm Chris Hood, Director of Product Planning for Utility, so that gives me the honor of representing both Ranger and our Sportsman brands.
Great. And just kind of so, here's the, it's a three-seater, right? Basically a lot like the XP 1000.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of pricing, we're looking at $25,000 for this premium one and $30,000 for this specific one, which is the Ultimate. So the biggest difference between those, right, is the battery pack.
Yeah, there's a couple of big differences between the Ultimate and the Premium. The battery pack is a piece of the story. The other piece is the Ride Command suite of features that we have on the vehicle. So your display that shows you where your trails are at, and then also connects to your new Ride Command Plus functionality as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on this specific one here, we're looking at, I think it's $35,000 with the accessories, right?
Correct. There's a whole bunch of different things on here that add to the experience, just showing an example of how somebody could equip the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So a little bit more price on top of that if the consumer likes these accessories, or they can choose their own.
Yeah, so this is more expensive than the XP 1000, but not honestly quite as more expensive as you might expect. I'd say like a 25% price increase. But these are lithium ion cells here, as you can see, they proudly say. There's a partnership with Zero Motorcycles that you guys embarked on, what, 2 years ago?
Yeah, correct. So we signed a 10-year agreement with them, and they've been a valuable partner as we've put this vehicle together and explore our other options as well.
Yeah, so the powertrain of this vehicle is kind of an interesting story, and this is also partially why it's more expensive. This is basically the most powerful side-by-side you guys have ever made, right?
It is for the Ranger line, yeah. So it's 110 horsepower, 140 foot-pounds of torque, and that's available sort of right off idle there if you think about it from an electric powertrain, that instantaneous response. It gives you the great advantages of low-speed drivability, but also that performance as well for when you need it.
Yeah, it's really cool. And we'll look at the motor in a second, but I just want to talk about the battery pack. So in this Ultimate one, you get the 29.8 kilowatt hour pack. That's the larger one. Funnily enough, Nathan's 2016 Nissan Leaf, I think, has a 24 kilowatt hour battery. So that's just crazy where the tech has gone, right? This UTV here has a bigger battery than that Nissan Leaf. And range in this one is looking at like 80 miles, right?
Yeah, it's about 80 miles, and that's very much an average driving experience that we're looking for. It's not sort of on a road down a hill with a tailwind. In a perfect scenario, it's very much representative of what somebody can do. There's a lot of situations that add up to the mileage you can get, similar to in a car if you're sitting in traffic or if you're driving on a highway.
Yeah.
So many different situations, but we're really confident that 80 miles, and we think it's perfect for the consumer. The premium one is about 45 miles.
Right. 45 miles for that. Yeah, premium one that's $5,000 cheaper. And this is basically, like you said, you guys are estimating this based off how people will use it, kind of conservatively, off-roading, ranching, that type of thing.
Correct. Yeah, and the great thing about it is if you think about how somebody's using a vehicle, where every time they step out of it, they keep it running, it's idling, they're burning gas. With an electric vehicle, you don't have that, right? When it's on, it's using a fraction of the power of anything that's on. So when it's sitting there, essentially it's off. So you have that proposition of how far you can drive, but also how far you can keep things idling between different projects. Keep some music going, keep the lights on, all those kind of things. So it's a very different proposition than what you would have on a typical gas vehicle. And the other thing is the mindset change. So think of it sort of like a power tool, where if you're not using your drill, you plug your battery in. Well, when you're not using this, you go inside for a sandwich or a drink over lunch, you plug it in. So it's just a mindset shift there in how you own the vehicle and how you interact with it.
Yeah, and on the note of the charging experience, we can kind of look at this over here. So basically you guys are offering the 3 kilowatt charger with the premium, 6 kilowatt with the Ultimate, and then you can actually add 3 kilowatts to either one with an optional accessory. And basically you're going to get around with the 6 kilowatt charger 5 hours from dead empty on level 2.
That is correct. Yeah, and level 1 or 2 for those for the consumers that may not understand that. Level 1 is essentially your 110 or 120 out of the wall. You're essentially limited in your charge time by the power you can get out of the wall. So you're not able to get more power to charge faster.
Yeah.
With the level 2, which is the 240 based, that's where you have enough power coming out of the wall to do that faster charging.
And a lot of your customers probably already have those like 240 volt, dryer outlets,
Absolutely.
For lack of a better term. But you have a partnership also to kind of help people get those installed if they don't have one yet.
Correct. We have a partnership with Qmerit, so they're able to hook you up with how you want to get that connected. It could be you have an outlet and you'd like to have it moved. It could be adding the entire charging system when you don't have anything. So there's lots of different options they can bring to the table to get you that solution you need.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I'll just speak candidly here. You know, the public charging experience with on-the-road cars with Electrify America charge point, doesn't matter who it is, can be hit or miss. And I honestly think the best part of electric vehicles is, like you said, that utility aspect of it, just charging it at home. So for something like this, I think that's awesome. But can we open up the bed and just kind of see what's going on underneath?
We sure can. Yeah, so it's not exactly, there's not a bunch to see in there. We have an NVH panel that essentially covers up all of the electronics and the motors and the different controllers.
Yeah, there's like a
that are
diagram
there.
I'll just come around to show.
Yeah, for sure. But underneath there is sort of where all the magic is happening, and then there's layers of foam and sound deadening material to really make that quiet electric experience that everybody is looking for on the vehicle. But lots of fun electronic things going on under there.
Yeah, but like you said, all kind of neatly covered up there, partially for NVH reasons. And that was because you guys, I guess, noticed that when you made this electric, you don't have the engine sound quieting all that or muffling all of that.
Correct. Yeah, when you have the electrification proposition, you lose a lot of those things that hide the noise of, say, rocks bouncing off pieces of plastic, and tire noise and wind noise and all these other things that happen with the vehicle. So things come to the front of what you're hearing that you traditionally have just never heard. And it's a little bit eerie when you first experience that, but then when you realize you can drive along and have a normal conversation or hear birds in the trees while you're riding along, it's a very fulfilling experience. And from being in it all day or a hunting proposition, it opens up so much potential to have that quiet proposition.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I'm a city slicker, but I can imagine many people looking at this will, have a beautiful property of some kind. You kind of get to enjoy it more in something like this. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Yep.
One thing I forgot to mention, the charging port here is right on the driver's side, right?
Correct. So it's the same place as you would expect our gas port, so minimal consumer learning to do. And then there's a cover here for the big debris, and then a sealed cover here for the water and other things that you might experience on the trail to make sure you've got a nice, clean point to be able to charge from at all times. And
Yeah.
it's a standard port, so the same thing you'd find in all other sort of charge locations that may be public or other chargers you may have already had installed.
Yeah, so the J, I think 1772, I'm always bad with
Correct.
it.
Yeah, there's several different standards for around the globe, so
Uh-huh.
the appropriate ones for the appropriate locations.
Great, yeah, no, that's pretty standard, great to see. And in terms of, like you said, the seals and covers, if someone were to store this in their shed without insulation or outside and stuff, the batteries, everything with that is going to be fine?
Correct. Yeah, it's all designed to be robust and deal with those different situations. So if it's cold weather, the batteries have heaters in them. So when you're plugged in, it's able to use that power to make sure your vehicle's ready to go at all times. If you're out ice fishing or doing something else in the cold and you're not plugged in, the onboard power capability can support that too. So a great proposition there. And then the cooling capability of the vehicle with the airflow and other things going on to make sure in hot conditions it's also just as capable.
Yeah, and while you're driving, you have an air-cooled battery system, but that seems to be plenty for this kind of application. And that's allowed you guys to do basically this slightly new hood design. There's a little bit bigger branding here. There's a body matching color. And of course, you get your very rugged bar here as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one of my favorite features, the accent light at the front, but it's also a functional light. As you plug the vehicle in and it progressively charges, the light fills in, so you can tell from wherever you're at, just looking at the vehicle, is it charged or not?
Can we turn on the lights for a second, actually?
We sure can.
And these are standard LEDs, so pretty bright.
Correct.
Pretty
These are super bright, basically turns night into absolute daylight. My specific ask on them was bring me the brightest possible light we can put in this vehicle.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done.
Yeah. And in additional lights, you guys are also packing the heat. Like you said, the batteries, of course, have the heat management, but there's also an option for a heating accessory in this, right?
Correct. So you can put a full cab on, you can have a heater in, and the great thing about the electric heater is that instant response. So you don't have to wait for an engine to warm up. You can basically just hit the button, be nice and comfortable, off you go.
And do you have an idea of how that'll impact range?
It obviously has an impact. It's very dependent on which setting you're on. So more heat equals more power that you're using. But essentially, it's a relatively low impact in the overall scheme of range things that impact.
Right.
So you'll lose maybe, call it somewhere between 10 and 20%, depending on how you're using it.
Great. And there's also another accessory on here. This is basically your guys' winch.
Yep, so the winch is standard with the ride command setup, so on the Ultimate model, but the premium models you're free to add from our suite of winches. This is one of my personal favorites. It's the HD winch, so 4,500 pounds, plenty capable of pulling down or pulling all kinds of things. The low and the high spool settings are super easy to use. Hook on the front here, the auto stop, so you're not going to pull anything too far in. And then my other favorite, the rope. And the rope, people obviously asked a lot of questions on, but ropes don't rust. They float in water.
Yeah.
They're just a better experience overall.
Yeah, is there a rope versus cable war going on in the...
There's a lot of people that still use cables.
Yeah.
And they're cheaper, but ropes do a better job overall, and it's a better experience for the consumer.
And, you know, just superficially, I like that blue accent color. Kind of matches the rest of the branding here.
A little bit easy to find in the grass, too.
Exactly, yeah. And so in terms of, like, you know, mechanics, like we're talking tires, the suspension, a lot of this setup is very similar to what people will find in an XP 1000, right?
Absolutely, yep. So the wheels and tires are basically carryover, the brakes. The suspension is set up a little bit differently because the CG of the vehicle obviously adjusts with that weight of the electrical
So the center of
components.
gravity is, I think, Brent Engineer was telling me, about an inch lower?
Yep, it's about an inch lower on this one. Obviously, those batteries are quite heavy, and they bring the CG down there.
Yeah.
But the suspension overall, it's a little bit of different valving in the shocks, and then a little bit of a different spring rate, so a mild tune.
Right. And in terms of weight, I was actually kind of impressed. This is not much heavier than XP 1000. I think it's like
a couple of 100 pounds for the Ultimate and about 100 pounds for the Premium, so not massively significant on sort of call it a 1,800, 2,000 pound vehicle.
right, and you're getting that 110 horsepower, 140 pound-foot electric motor. So honestly, I think that's going to more than make up for that.
Yep, absolutely. And the torque, I mean, 140 sounds like a lot, but when you compare it to ICE vehicles in the category, it's well more than twice as much.
Right. I mean, we use, might be sacrilegious to say, but, you know, a mule on our ranch, and like the power to weight ratio on these kinds of vehicles is already off the charts, but you add something like this to it, just awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of the interior, can you kind of give me a brief, like, just overview of the features we're getting in the cab?
Yeah, absolutely. So the same great interior you would expect with any of our XP 1000 Ranger vehicles, but a couple of changes based on it being electric. So a brand new display here. Obviously, you don't need RPM and you don't need gas gauges. So you have a battery gauge this time, which indicates your battery percentages. You have your standard, you know, miles per hour and hours and an overall tracking of the vehicle. But we've switched out that RPM with a power percentage chart. So essentially that's going to tell you how much of your maximum power you're using, so how much of that 110, and it also tells you the regen. So that's kind of a fun thing depending on which drive mode you're on and how much regen you have of how much power you're putting back into the system based on how you're driving. Right. And the easiest way to think of that from a consumer perspective, it's almost an engine braking system, but it's variable then because you can adjust it. It's not set up by some hard component in the clutches. It's basically a software piece that we can adjust. So in the eco drive mode that we have, it has the most regen, and in the performance mode we have, it has the least.
And when you're using that regen, that's obviously less wear on the brakes. So you guys are expecting, I think you said 70% reduced kind of maintenance cost with this?
Yeah, so you don't have the air filters, you don't have the oil, you don't have a big radiator up front. So all those things that would take you into I've got to go do this on the weekend or, you know, do something with my vehicle, spend some money in maintenance, you don't have those anymore. The really only couple of things you have to touch is there's a small sealed coolant system that you have to touch very rarely for the motor control unit, and then you have the fluids in the transmission and the front differential, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that, you get basically all the features that you get in those nicer premium Rangers. It's not like you guys took those away to make this work with electric. You were able to have enough battery range and stuff to make that all work, which is awesome.
All about making a better experience. And the other cool thing that you really have to ride to experience is the shifter. Traditionally, you'd have obviously the reverse and the high and the low and all that sort of in there. We've reduced that experience to make it you can select between high and low, but you also have the ability to switch between forward and reverse in either of those gears with just the flip of a switch. So the cool thing about that is if you're plowing or doing a lot of maneuvering with trailers or other things, you can just switch that on the fly with your thumb. Way less shifts to do with your entire arm movement. So throughout the day, it really adds up to that fatigue, but also ease of use perspective.
Yeah, and in terms of the actual transmission here, it's a pretty simple, but kind of, I'm sure, rock solid setup, right? It's a cog-based belt drive.
Yeah, so it's think of it as being directly coupled to the motor. You don't have a CVT or any of that proposition going on. You don't have air to get into CVTs. It's simply this sort of lifetime of the vehicle cogged belt that direct connects the two.
Yeah, and in terms of, everyone will be asking, like, all-wheel drive, this is the same capable all-wheel drive system as you would get in a normal Ranger.
Correct. The same proven on-demand all-wheel drive system that you would expect out of a Ranger. So simple to use at the press of a button. If you see, a muddy pod ahead of you or something where you feel you need that extra traction, you can just flip the switch and you're good to go.
And the system also, I think they were saying this will predict if there's slip on the wheels, it'll add in the front if it needs to.
Correct. It's about 1/7 of the rotation of a rear wheel in slip before it would engage the front. And then once that happens, all the wheels are driving to pull you out of that situation.
Right, but it's all that one motor, so you got that just connected through to a transmission. It's not like there's separate motors on each
Correct.
axle.
Just a prop shaft that goes to the front drive.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome. With the XP Kinetic, Newton's fourth law must be that you have to name an electric vehicle, give it a cool, catchy name. As far as they go, I think Kinetic's pretty cool. But I love this. Thanks so much, Chris, for giving me a look at it. And in terms of availability, I have another question if you could answer. I know these are like right now on your website, I was looking sold out. What does availability look like if someone is interested in getting one of these?
Yeah, I would say so. We have an order session that we're excited to fulfill a little bit later this year, and then we look forward to future order sessions as well to be able to fulfill those consumer demands. So as folks wish to buy vehicles, talk to your dealer. Let's get a list going with them, and we look forward to having your order.
Yeah, and one more question. You just mentioned the dealers, right? This shares a lot with the Ranger XP on the gas one. So in terms of accessories and parts, a lot of those will just carry over.
Yeah, it's about 95% of the accessories carry over. There's only about 8 or 9 part numbers that are unique to this one. So heater kit would be a great example of that. But everything else essentially fits. So super easy to use.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.